Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Yellowstone Yams Team Builder Dynasty here on College Football 25. I'm very excited to finally get this kicked off. We've been working really hard on this Team Builder. If you want to download it yourself, you can check out SFA Commish on the Team Builder website, or you can just type in the keyword Yams and download from there. This team is located in Billings, Montana. They are a cupcake roster, 71 overall. We do have some adjusted ratings for some custom players, but this is very much a very tough rebuild if you want to give it a shot yourself. So now on to the actual dynasty creation. We will be replacing the Wyoming Cowboys with the Yellowstone Yams because in game they are the closest team to where Yellowstone is going to be in Billings, Montana, and we want to make sure those ratings that we get in game are going to be as close as possible for realism. Now, one of the best parts of Team Builder is developing that backstory for your program on how you became a Division One team. It adds to the realism, it adds to a lot to the fun. So in our dynasty, the Pac-12 is trying to rebuild, and how they did that was gutting the Mountain West. They take teams like Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, Hawaii, San Diego State, and UNLV. And also in this scenario, they are taking BYU from the Big 12. Now, while that might not be realistic, I did need to get to that 9-team mark here so we could still have 8 conference games. And so in our dynasty, the kind of the backstory there is that the Big 12 and the BYU Cougars had a bit of a falling out as the Big 12 wanted them to play some games on in their sports schedule on Sundays, and they said this was a non-negotiable. Now, BYU, as a religious school, does not play on Sundays, so that had a falling out, and they went over to the Pac 12, who is more than happy to accommodate them. So that's kind of the story we are going with. Now, what happens in the Big 12 now that BYU is gone? Well, we have UConn taking their place. They are going to join the Big 12 as a full sports school, primarily for basketball, men's and women's. They are the best program out there. So in this scenario, they will be a full sports member taking over that BYU spot. This also helps the Big 12 with that Eastern expansion and positions them in a spot where in the future they could potentially move towards those ACC teams when that grant of rights breaks down in the future. Now, here's what the Mountain West looks like now. We still have Air Force, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah State, San Jose State. However, we add Conference USA teams, New Mexico State, UTEP, and UTSA from the American. Now, UTSA may be a bit of a weird choice for some. However, in terms of Texas geography, they are still the closest team with UTEP to the Mountain West Conference. And in the SFA, they have a ton of storylines with Dogwater as the coach, Coach JT, and just a rich history. So they are going to be a fun addition to this conference. Now in the future, I might switch out some of these teams with team builder teams. However, for the first season and the initial launch, this is what it's going to look like. And how that affects Conference USA is we took some of their teams. However, we are also going to add Rice from the Americans so that they can still be at that 9 spot for their number of teams in the conference. And then finally, the American looks like this. We took 2 teams from them, but they will still have 12 teams total to compete, and they'll still be probably the strongest group of 5, group of 6 conference out there, along with the Pac 12. So here's a look at what the conference rules are going to look like for these new conferences we just edited, primarily the Mountain West, the Pac-12, and the Conference USA. They will all have 8 conference games, so it's a full round robin. You'll play every single team in the conference each year. The conference championship game will still happen between the top 2 in the conference with conference record, with the top team in the regular season hosting that game at home. Now remember, this is important because the winner of this conference game could go to the college football playoff. None of the other conferences were edited at all. It's just the base game for their system. I didn't touch anything else than what I've shown you in this video. So now that that's all settled, let's get into the creation of our head coach for the Yellowstone Yams. Now, we are going to pick the recruiting starting path because this is a brand new program. We are going to need to recruit heavy to help this cupcake roster and fill all these holes. Now, for the coach creation, we are going to have Chad Barber, the Cincinnati legend and SFA Hall of Famer, take control of the Yellowstone Yams. Our playbooks is going to be Penn State, at least initially, and our defensive playbook is going to be the 3-3-5. I think this playbook is really good, fits this roster very well, so that's just what I'm going to use. My alma mater I'm setting is Colorado because GCU's not in the game, and the pipeline is going to be the Big Sky because remember, we are in Montana, Big Sky's right there. And for all this other stuff, I'm just going to go base because I don't really know what I want to do with it quite yet. So this is what Chad Barber is going to look like. We are going to give him that nice sweatshirt because we are obviously in the north. It's going to get cold. We're going to see some snow games. And this is a look at what our contract's going to look like. Now remember, we are taking over Wyoming, so it does show all their stats, unfortunately. However, the key here is our first contract. They want us to make a bowl game in the first 3 years, which is going to be tough with this roster. Now here's a look at our initial roster. We're a 69 overall team. We are 2-star prestige. Now I have changed a lot of the names in here for some SFA players, which we're going to go through each and every one of them. But I will put up the legend here on the screen for you if you want to pause, if you want to put these players in the Dynasty yourself. Now here's our quarterback, Leon Fox, transfer from Western Kentucky. He is a senior. He is a lefty. He will be our one-year fix. And I'm very excited to use him for once. One of the greatest stories out of the SFA, has an American championship. And our backup is Eugene McKinney, another great story, transfer from Kent State. We will redshirt him, see if he develops. Now, I did find Bryce Frost on our base roster. He is a star development, one of 8 players on this roster with that trait. We have nothing better. We will redshirt him and see what happens there, but I don't think much will come of him. But moving on to our running backs, Jerome Neal, the transfer from Georgia Tech. He has the longest run in SFA history, live on game day against Army for 99 yards. He will be the lead guy. And our backup will be Aaron Spurlock, the transfer from UTSA. He will be our change of pace guy. Very excited to have these 2 running backs. Very different flavors for both of them. They have very different feelings. So we'll see who ends up getting more playing time in year 1. But we're also going to heavily use Sean Martin. The transfer from Southern Miss led him to the CFP, and he is a bruiser up the gut. Now, looking at wide receivers, Tyrone Easley will be the best playmaker on this team for the first couple of seasons. He is a junior. He is the transfer from Akron, and he is a big play guy, deep threat, very good ratings, very fun to use in this game. Our second guy is going to be Chuck Sledge, transfer from Western Kentucky, along with Leon Fox. He'll have heavy playing time. We also have Nick Mixon on this team, transfer from USC. He broke out in the season 15 CFP. And we also have a base guy, Javon Moore. He will be the wide receiver number 5. He might get some playing time. Ryan McGee, transfer from Wyoming, SFA guy. He will be our wide receiver number 4 to kick us off. And Fred Hart, the best player on this team, transfer from Fresno State, made the CFP semifinal. Can't wait to use him. But here's a look at our offensive line. We got Tyreek Williams, who will start at left tackle year 1. We also have Blake Sutton here. He is another one of those stars. He is a senior though, so I am going to redshirt him so that in the season 2 we can have a really good left tackle, hopefully guarding whatever new quarterback we bring in here. But looking at the rest of the offensive line, we've got Max McClure at left guard. At center, we have Jalen McDonald. A lot of these guys are big pass blockers. However, he is much more balanced. At right guard, though, our best guy, DeMarcus Perkins, another one of those star players. We'll be running behind him a lot. And our right tackle, Kalen Franklin, another one of our more balanced guys on this line. Now moving on to the defense, we've got Jed Patrick, the transfer from Navy. He was a golden ticket player, didn't really work out. And on the other side, we got Jared Gilbert, transfer from Iowa, just led them to a Big Ten championship game. In the middle, Terry Baker is going to be a very critical piece of this team, transfer from Oklahoma State. We also have Cade Bloom, a defensive tackle here, and he is another one of those stars. We'll redshirt him and see if he can turn into anything here in the next couple of seasons. But outside linebacker Jordan Anderson from Southern Miss is an SFA player, led him to the CFP. And in the middle, the most important player on this defense, AJ Flanagan, transfer from ECU. He has a national championship and he has a neck injury, so a very low injury rating. Hopefully, he can stay on the field for us. But behind him is Clint Jackson. If you see him a lot, then it's bad news for Flanagan, but he is also an SFA player. We also got Rhett Bush at right outside linebacker, transfer from Minnesota. He's made a lot of plays throughout the years. And Berta Jones, the secondary in this game, is going to be awesome. He's a transfer from Wyoming, big physical corner. And on the other side, you got the Southern Miss transfer, John Henley. He is a much more traditional corner. Really good ball skills for him. And then we also got the speedster Charlie Gutierrez in the slot. He will also return our kicks as he's one of the fastest players on this team. DeMarvin Holland is a depth corner for us along with Dakota Mills. They should be playing those fourth and fifth corner spots. Our starting safety is going to be Lamar Lanes, transfer from UTSA, lost his job to Rylan Warrenberg, transferred to the Yams, and he is going to be a critical part for us for the next couple of years. We also have Jay Jones, started out in Florida, transferred to Akron. He is a big-time player for us, and hopefully going to be very valuable. You also see Valentine get some playing time here or there as a depth safety. Our kicker is Austin Anderson. He is going to be a one-year fix for kicker. Pretty good. And then we have Matthew York at punter, who is a star, very good player, and we'll be using him quite a bit, I imagine. Now here's a look at all of our red shirts year one. Now I'm going to try to maximize our red shirts as much as possible as you can burn red shirts. You can have players now play up to 4 games without burning that red shirt. So we're going to start out with just pretty much giving anybody possible. Only have 2 backup offensive linemen, and this can always change. But because the vast majority of this team is juniors or better, I'm trying to maximize that 3rd year for us, that 3rd year eligibility, because we do have to replace this entire roster after only 3 cycles. Now, here's a look at our conference projections. We are projected to finish 5th in the Mountain West this year. In terms of preseason All-Americans, we have none nationally. However, in the Mountain West, we do have Fred Hart at tight end. He is supposed to be the best in the conference. And Terry Baker, AJ Flanagan make this list, along with the punter, Matthew York. Now here's a look at our preseason top 25 as we enter year 1. Now the plan moving forward for year 1, since there has not been a patch yet for the sim engine, is just to make sure that some of these top contenders don't lose to FCS teams or very low level Division 1 teams. So I'll force win some games each week. However, for the vast majority, I'm just going to let it ride and we're just going to have fun with what happens and just take the game at face value. Now here's a look at our schedule year 1. We got Buffalo at home to open the season. We've got Baylor on the road in week 3. That's our toughest games. We do have those 8 Mountain West games, and our other 2 non-conference games is East Carolina at home and Boise State on the road in week 13. So now let's look at recruiting. And remember, we are taking over for Wyoming, so all of our ratings are equal to theirs. And we are starting out as a 2-star team, as the 118th ranked team out of 134. And remember, we are taking over their spot in like proximity to home, stadium atmosphere. These are all the same rankings as Wyoming would be at the beginning. Now, things like playing style, proximity to home, and playing time all vary per recruit based on their wants and their needs and their locations. But everything else, it does seem to be we are stuck in the C and the D range here, which is going to be pretty difficult for us in terms of selling points. It looks like our best selling points here are conference prestige and coach stability, and so that is the starting point here for the Yellowstone Yams. Now, if you know me and you know how I play Dynasty, is I'm a very sim guy. I do not enjoy taking a really bad team, rebuilding them in 2 years, and winning a bunch of national championships. That's just no fun for me. I like realism. I like being really bad. I like struggling to get to a bowl game. I like struggling to get to a conference championship. And then I love those scenarios where you get a gem player that kind of opens up a championship window so to speak, that you then could make a run for the national championship, right? But then you're going to get knocked back down into just regular bowl-esque type of a team. So I've already played about 4 or 5 test dynasties, gone through a handful of years, and what I've already found in this new game is it's incredibly easy to recruit, and it's incredibly easy to improve your team just based off of things like progression alone. There is no regression that I've seen. It seems like regardless of who you bring in and what terms of talent, your team tends to go up and hovers around 80 to 85 overall, no matter what at some point. So what I have devised here is house rules. This is very common for NC14 dynasties throughout the last 11 years, and this is what we're going to use for the Yellowstone Yams. Now, how it's going to work is the teams highlighted that you see on the screen are going to be the only states at the start that we can recruit in. That means we cannot dip into California talent. This means we cannot dip into Texas talent, Ohio, Florida, any of those intense battlegrounds or places you find a ton of talent. We are only going to be able to recruit in pretty much the Rocky Mountains / Big Sky area. Now, we are located in Montana, so that red means that any and all players that come through Montana, we have to go all in. We have to send the house. We need them on the roster. As the only team in the Montana area, we are going to get every single one of those recruits or use all of our points trying to get them. It will be a horrible error if we do not get them, whether they're a 1-star or a 5-star. Any Montana players, they are coming to the Yellowstone Yams. Now, the thing about this game is getting players in these rural areas like Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming. They're almost never in the game, as you guys will see here shortly for our first year. So these players, when they come through on Montana, we are going to have to add them to the board regardless of their talent, and we're going to need to bring them in. Now, teams in orange, these are kind of our pipelines. Now, these have some restrictions, so we can recruit any players from 1-star to 3 stars regardless of interest range, and then we can only recruit 4 stars if they do have us in their initial starting interest. If they do not have us in the starting interest, we will not be able to add them to the board, unfortunately, in these 4 states. And just as a rule, outside Montana, we can never recruit a 5-star. Now in Utah and Colorado, I originally just wanted to do these top 5. However, once I started going through these test dynasties and saw how little recruits actually came through Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, and South Dakota, then I had to add Colorado and Utah. The reason is that there's just not enough player base in these other states, so we have to add Utah and Colorado, which is really where a lot of teams that we compete with in our conference also recruit, and also in the Pac-12. So this is going to offer some very interesting battles. However, here we can only recruit players. We can recruit any 1-stars or 2-stars. However, we can only recruit 3 stars if they have us in their initial interest, and the same thing with 4 stars, only if they're in our initial interest. And then never any 5 stars regardless of interest in these states. And we might do things like if we hit a bowl game, we might add a state. Just depends how it goes. But at the start, these are the restrictions that we are going by. Now, with that being said, let's check out our preseason recruiting here for year 1, and no prospects are in Montana. That is no good. So now let's go check North Dakota, and no prospects here either. This is not looking good for year 1. So South Dakota, yeah, we have one guy here, Rayshawn Keys. Looks like he's a linebacker, JUCO sophomore. We are going to add him to the board. He's only a 2-star, fits within our restrictions. Should be very easy. Now I'm going to scroll up to Idaho. Actually, no, we're going to take a look at Wyoming first here. This is another one of those ones where I feel like there just should be a lot more prospects in these areas. This was much better in NCAA 14. However, we do have a kicker, James Hardrick, that we can go after here, so we're going to add him to the board. Now we're gonna move on to Idaho here, see who is here. Normally there's a lot more, and there is. So there's a lot of players here, all 3 stars. We can add them all to the board. We've got Alton Wall, Bryce Slack, and then we've got an athlete, Ricky Follin, and a 1-star quarterback, Kurt Hurley. Now he is a 1-star, probably not all that good, but we are gonna add him to the board. Now let's move on to Colorado. This is where we're going to get the bang for our buck. And it looks like we have 3 4-stars we could go after, but we can only go after one with our restrictions. Unfortunately, this 4-star quarterback we can't get, but Rob Cole, an offensive lineman, we can go after, and another wide receiver. That one hurts as well. But that is the restrictions we're going by. We are just not that good of a quality team to be going after all of these 4-stars. So we have one on the board, then we're going to add these 3-stars here. Remember, we can only add the 3 stars that have interest in us here. We got a quarterback, Subtle, which is awesome. We can go after a better quarterback outside just that 1-star Hurley in Idaho. We cannot go after Fog here. However, we do have an athlete here that we can go after, which is DeMarco Sheets. It looks like he might be a quarterback, a scrambler, so that's exciting to see. We're 4th for him, and we're going to add him to the board. We got Jose Poe, and he looks like a running back, so that's awesome for us as well, getting a running back that we can go after. We got another wide receiver that we can go after here as well that we're going to add to the board, and we're just going to keep on going down and down this list. Bunch of 2-stars looks to be interested in us here. Let's add them all to the board. A lot of linemen, middle linebackers, left outside, another wide receiver. That's awesome to see. We gotta bring in as many skill positions as we can, because you gotta remember, we are trying to replace this entire roster in the first 3 seasons, as pretty much our entire roster is juniors or older. We got a punter here, could be the next generation, and then a bunch of 1-stars here. Now this is a 2-star that we can add, even though he's not interested in us. And then we're going to add all of these 1-stars. Now, probably not going to go after many of these guys initially, but we got to add them to the board so we can get that initial interest rocking and rolling. And now we're going to move on over to Utah here. And for Utah, man, there's a 5-star that we can't go after him, even if he was interested in us. This is just not one of those states where a 5-star would be possible. And there is multiple 4-stars here that we can't go after either. And now there's 3-stars that we can't go after. Oh, it's everybody. Man, Utah hates Montana. I guess none of these 3-stars have us in their starting interest, which is very unfortunate. However, there are a couple of 2-stars we can add from Utah that is going to round out our board here. But that's very frustrating with those other players. But that is just the name of the game. So that is every player that we are able to recruit here in year 1. So now we're going to go move on to scouting them and giving them those starting scholarships. So it's really important for us to offer everybody a scholarship right off the bat. I haven't even scouted any of them, but these are the only 34 guys we can go after in this entire season. We cannot go back and add low lock cheese or anything. This is it. So these 34 guys are it. So we got to get into these battles as quickly as possible. And how you do that is by offering scholarships. Remember, we just need warm bodies at this point. Skill comes later. Now, before we get to scouting, we're going to do our first coach upgrade in the recruiting tree. Now, just based on who I added to the board, I saw more offensive linemen, so that's the way we're going to go to start it out. Now, after our preseason scouting, look at DeMarco Sheets. My goodness, quarterback of the future. He is easily the number 1 prospect on our board with that throw power and that speed. He is going to be electric if we can manage to get him. Next up, we have Wall here, who is a offensive lineman. No bad ratings. Everything is above 70, so he is going to be on our preseason board. Next up is Follin. He's another athlete. Looks like more of a pulling guard. So I've identified him as a good target here at the beginning of the season. And I have Keys up here. Now, he's more of a 2-star. We don't necessarily know too much about him. However, my philosophy here is he is the only prospect we have from our core 4 states, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wyoming. So we do want to make sure we do get him. And then we've got Jose Poe. We don't necessarily know much about him, but he is the only running back we are able to recruit this season, and running back is one of our biggest needs. So we are definitely going to want to bring in Poe here. Now, here's the 4-star Rob Cole. Now, we don't necessarily know much about him, but you know he's a 4-star. You know he's going to be pretty good, better than anything the Yams probably have currently. So he's going to be a big part of our recruiting process here early, and he's on the board. Now, here's a look at the other quarterbacks that we had available. Now, Sean Suttle, he is pretty good. Now, that speed does concern me. Obviously, the speed is a great bailout, helps with those read options, and just opens up the playbook a bit more. So he's definitely going to be the backup option for Sheets. And then finally, here is a look at Hurley, that 1-star from Idaho. He's actually pretty serviceable. Not the best throw power, does have a bit of speed. I'd compare him a lot closer to how Leon Fox currently is. So he's definitely an option if we need him eventually. And some other guys here, I found Aviles is a better kicker than Hardrick. He looks like he just has more power, so I am going to add him to the board here. And but we are going to go after both of them, obviously. And I've identified a middle linebacker here. We don't know any hardcore ratings quite yet, but it does look like he's very speedy, very rangy, and speed kills in this game. And that's kind of how our roster is currently set up, so I figured I'd put him towards the top. And finally, a wide receiver we scouted here is Schumann. Now, he has 75 catching as a base. That's going to be huge for us if we can manage to get him. And now we'll go to week 1. So as you look at the update here, it's all good news as there are prospects that have locked us into their top 8. Nobody has kept us out, so all 34 prospects are still on the board as we head into week 0. So in week 1, after I've gone through all the prospects, scouted just a little bit more. I don't want to use too much of our hours here in the first week scouting, but this is where we're at. So DeMarco Sheets, 100% is going to be our number 1 guy, and we are going to send the house on him here. We're number 3. We're competing with both Colorado schools for him. They're the only ones that have offered him, so I do feel like we are in the thick of this race. Next up is Rob Cole, another tough battle. I don't think we'll necessarily get him. I think Nebraska and Colorado is pretty hard, but he is going to be one of those prospects we kind of send the house for at the beginning. Now, here's a guy I do think we'll get. Alton Wall, the right tackle. He has some decent ratings from what we've seen. We are battling both BYU and Boise State. However, I do think that we can compete with these schools. Same thing with Folan. Now, he is that pulling guard that we just saw, and I really feel like we can win this battle. Jose Poe, battling with those Colorado schools. Once again, Colorado does have a little bit, or Colorado State, has a bit more of that pipeline bonus, but once again, he's the only running back on the roster. It's one of our biggest needs, so I feel like we just have to go after him. Rayshawn Keys, we are currently not in his top 8, so we are still saying the house. Remember, my philosophy is I do want that South Dakota guy here on this roster. And then Colin Schumann, I decided to put him as one of our send the house guys just because of that 75 catching that we did see here. Very, very high on him, and I really like the speed, and I really think he's going to be pretty good, and I don't really want to spend the points to continue to scout him because I do believe he is going to be very good for us. Now, we're also going to put some points on Bryce Slack here. We don't know too much about him, but we are in second, and we have our backups for our quarterbacks. We're just going to put a little bit of points into these guys just to keep pace in the race in case Sheets doesn't end up working out. We're not super behind, and then we wind up with no quarterbacks, right? So we got to spend some points on some of these guys just to make sure we do get somebody in the door that we can start developing. This kicker, nobody else has interest. I don't necessarily need a kicker because we did redshirt one. So Aviles, I am just going to put 5 points on him, see if we can get him through just a commit. Now, I did find another wide receiver here, Lewis Kronk. We are at number 3 with him. I decided to put him on the board just because I do see speed. I do see decent things everywhere. The catch in traffic's okay, but this is just another kind of
kind of case of guys that we need. Now, Garrison Cleveland, he could be incredible if that speed is incredibly high and the catching 75. This could be an amazing deep threat find, so we're going to put some points into him. Next week I will scout him a bit more, but that's just kind of where we're going to go at the beginning here in this process, week 0. And then to finish out the episode, let's take a look around the league. We'll look at the initial Heisman watch, and looks like Ollie Gordon is the favorite. Shedeur Sanders is number 2. Quinshawn Judkins is number 3. Travis Hunter, number 4. And Carson Beck, number 5. Let's go Daddy Shedeur and Travis Hunter. As you guys know, I'm a real-life Colorado fan, so love to see them actually win it in our sim. And then finally, this is what week 0 is going to look like for us. We are facing Buffalo in the next episode. The big one, though, is going to be Florida State, Georgia Tech. UConn, Maryland could be fun. Miami at USF could be tough. Oklahoma and Tulane is going to be very interesting because remember, Tulane was very good last year, IRL. And then Oregon and Boise State could be another tough one here for Oregon. So last thing to do before we get out of here is look at the uniforms for our Yellowstone Yams. If you want to download the Team Builder, you definitely can. We got our nice home and away, the yellow and the white. We got a beautiful black with the Yam helmet. I absolutely love this set. And then we've got a couple of fun ones. This is the Ranger concept. And then finally, we've got a completely crazy one with the Blood Wolf as well for you guys. So that's going to do it for the first episode of the Yellowstone Yams. I'm incredibly excited for this series going on YouTube. This is the first of its kind, true content we're putting on the YouTube channel. We are on the road to 500 subscribers. That's our goal for this year. So please like this video, please subscribe, and comment anything and everything you want to see from this series. Do you guys like actual live commentary for the games? You want voiceover? Is there anything specific you like other creators doing this type of content, what they do that you want me to do? This is kind of a blank canvas. This episode was much more difficult and much more time consuming for me to put together than I originally thought, but I had a lot of fun doing it, so just any feedback would be awesome from you guys. But next episode we'll have Buffalo at Yellowstone for our first game in program history, so cannot wait for that one. I'll see you then.